A New Channels production, and New Channels has no responsibility for the content or opinions expressed therein. The following program is not a New Channels production, and New Channels has no responsibility for the content or opinions expressed therein.
As a public service to the citizens of the city of Fulton, I've been volunteering my time to videotape meetings since January 1992. My only motive is a firm belief an informed electorate will make an informed decision at election time that will ultimately benefit us all. If you share my belief and would help to donate blank videotape to help me with my expenses, please call me at 598-5120. My name is Terry Reynolds. Videotapes of all City of Fulton Common Council meetings are available to rent free of charge to the public at Video World. And special thanks to Shannon's Hot Dog Stand for their blank videotape donations that help bring this service working for you.
I don't know if we can do this though. That clock in the office is fast. Yeah. Once he's all through, when he ends, take a different tile.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First Ward, Second Ward,
Here.
Third Ward,
Here.
Fourth Ward,
Here.
Fifth Ward,
Here.
Sixth Ward.
First item on the agenda, please.
Whereas at a meeting of this Common Council held on June 1st, 1993, the city clerk was directed to advertise to receive sealed bids in his office in the municipal building, Fulton, New York, on or before June 29th, 1993, up to 4 p.m. for tree and stump removal in the city of Fulton, in accordance with specifications prepared by city engineer Neil Beebe. The first bid is from Monroe Tree Service. And their bid is $23,400. The second bid is from Area Line and Tree Company. And their bid is $23,573.
Oh, yeah, that's good indeed.
Now therefore be it resolved that all bids be referred to the city engineer for his review and recommendation of award to be returned to this common council at their next regular meeting to be held on July 6, 1993 at 7:30 p.m. in the common council chambers of the municipal building, Fulton, New York. And be it further resolved that this common council reserves the right to reject any and all bids that they deem to be not to be in the best interest of the city of Fulton, or if they deem the bids to be too high.
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Whereas at a meeting of this common council held on June 22, 1993, all bids for the new city storage sewer from Fay Street to Burt Street project were referred to Gelson Engineers and Architects for their review and recommendation of award to be returned to this common council at the special meeting of June 29, 1993. And whereas per their letter dated June 25, 1993, Gelson recommends that the bid be awarded to Marcellus Construction Company as the qualified low bidder in the amount of $540,187. And whereas this common council agrees with the recommendation made by Gelson Engineers and Architects, now therefore be it resolved that the low bid of $540,187 submitted by Marcellus Construction Company is hereby accepted and awarded to said Marcellus Construction Company at this meeting of June 29, 1993.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Three, please.
Resolved that the city chamberlain be authorized to continue payments for non-professional services under the A1460.10 records management account. Said payments to be reimbursed by the state under the new 1993-94 records management grant.
I'll move it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Three, please, or four, please.
Whereas at a meeting of the Common Council held on May 18, 1993, the city clerk was directed to advertise for a public hearing to be held on June 29, 1993 at 7:30 p.m. in the Common Council chambers of the municipal building, Fulton, New York, relative to a proposed local law to create the position of city administrator for the city of Fulton. Said hearing is now declared open.
Before opening for comments, let me say a few words. Apparently there was some misunderstanding as to who drafted this proposal, and Mr. Luddington was criticized in part for some of the provisions in it. Mr. Luddington did not draft this. I drafted it. And I wanted to clear up that. Now, there has been some suggestion, some controversy regarding the position, the qualifications, duties, job description. The idea was simply at least bring this before the council, because this is something that for many years has been kind of kicked around. Many people thought it was necessary. I think it's necessary. I know it's necessary. I know that there's no way a mayor, part-time mayor, can assume all the duties in the city. It's impossible. unless you're not doing anything else, and there's not everybody can qualify for that. But there are provisions in it. It is actually titled Administrator / Personnel Director. And one of the things I'd like to clear up, there is no personnel director in this city. There is nowhere, nobody, including myself, who has the power to take care of all personnel matters in the city. It's scattered throughout the city. Part of it is done by the Commissioner of Public Works, part of it by the Fire and Police Commission, and part of it by the mayor. But there really is no one central place where they report to a personnel director where there is some change to be made, some problem involving personnel. We don't have that position. And the idea was to create that along with the administrator, because the administrator is going to be involved in personnel. That's going to be probably 75% of his job. So he would be the natural person to be involved. And of course, with the direction of the mayor and with the common council, if that's the way the council decides that it should be administered. So that was the purpose of including him as part of that job or title as administrator. There also was a provision in there to consolidate civil service with that position. That would, of course, have meant a referendum. And my idea was it can all be done at once. And, of course, it would also save money for the city. That doesn't have to be done that way. Those portions can be deleted, and the council, if they desire, can do so. And if they wish, take it up at a later time. But the personnel director is something we do need badly. And it does not require a lot of time, believe me. The time that is required for the administrator is going to be mostly other duties. Now, a lot of people tonight here don't want to have a lot of repetition of things that are going to be said by people who want to speak. I'm going to limit the speaking time to 3 minutes unless there is good reason to extend it, and I will be liberal in that respect if necessary. But I do want to eliminate a lot of repetition where it doesn't serve any useful purpose. And also to eliminate response to people who have already spoken. Once you're up, got something to say, that's the time to say it. Okay? Now declare the public hearing open. And we'll start from the left, go across the front, and then back to the left on each row till everybody's had a chance. Okay? No takers? Bill?
Mayor, council, glad to see all these people here. This is very important. I think the administrator is a good idea, but at the same time, I think we're going in the wrong direction. For one thing, there's no clear-cut person to who the administrator is answerable to. Secondly, I think it's a stopgap operation. The city needs a full-time mayor. If we're going to put out $40,000, $50,000 a year for an administrator, why not make the mayor's job a full-time job? Make him answerable to the people. Every 4 years, if this guy doesn't do the job, you get him out of office. If you hire an administrator and he falls under the CSEA, you're stuck with him unless he turns out to be a crook. Secondly, if he's in there under a 2-year mayor, you're not going to get quality people for the simple reason is who's going to want to take a job for 2 years? And if the mayor is defeated, the person that took the job is out of the job. Am I correct? You're sitting there laughing at me, and I'm asking you a question.
Okay. Well, there's more to it than that, Phil. Go ahead and...
Well, what I'm saying, if he operates at the discretion of the mayor, and he's appointed by the mayor, then where are you going to find a qualified person to come in here and take a job for 2 years, not knowing that he's got a job the next 2 years, or they have a job the next 2 years? If you hire him and he works under the council, he has to answer to 6 people on the council. How are you going to accomplish anything by having to check with every council member and saying, well, can I do this, or can I do that, or can I do this? And after a while, we're going to have a very lax council. We're going to have a very lax mayor, for the simple reason is we're going to say, hey, this is your job. Take care of it. I think the city ought to put a referendum in a proposition on a November ballot for a full-time, 4-year mayor. We have a weak mayor system now. The mayor comes in, the first year he's operating off the previous administration's budget, which he's locked into. The second year, he has 6 months of his own time. If he wants to get re-elected, he's spending 6 months running. So you're actually getting probably 6 months of actual good working time out of a part-time mayor. We have all kinds of facilities in this city that have been closed down because we don't have money. I think in a 2 years' time it will take to make a full-time mayor's job. We can decide if we're going to have the money to do this, and we can plan for it. This jumping in and just coming up with these ideas and throwing it, it's too expensive. It's too costly. We have parks in the area that need fixing up.
Phil, we're only talking about the administrator. Okay, let's stick to
I'm saying this is 1993. Where are we going to come up with $40,000 or $50,000? You guys are going to be gone in January. You can pass anything you want now, and whoever gets in there is stuck with it. And that's Democrat or Republican. You guys are putting a bullet out there. The guy that takes the office next year is stuck with it. And I think we ought to put a hold on this thing and go for a full-time mayor, let the people decide, and we'll have 2 years to plan on it, get our monies together so that we can implement the full-time mayor process and make him responsible to the people. That is his job. His bread and butter will come from the job. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, you talk about having an administrator for 2 years possibly, although I come to that, and then he's out of a job. So what do you do with a full-time mayor in 4 years? He's out of a job. You're asking a man to serve as full-time mayor, and incidentally, you're not going to save much money by that because you're going to pay a full-time mayor a lot of money as well. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. Whether you have an administrator or a full-time mayor, it's going to cost money. And if you want efficiency in the city, then you better do something about it, because if you don't get an administrator, you're not going to get efficiency. But no man with any qualifications is going to give up a job and take full-time mayor's position and then 4 years later maybe be out of a job. You may get people who are retired or on disability, not that they can't do the job, but that's who you're going to be looking for if you're going to have a full-time mayor. And that's going to limit your choices very, very severely. With a part-time mayor, you're going to get men who care. You're going to get men who want to do, and women, who want to do something for this city. But they're going to have an administrator that's going to do a job that's badly needed in this city. I don't have the time to spend on this job I should have, and I feel badly about it. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not running again. Maybe I wouldn't be elected anyway, but that's a compelling reason why I'm not running. And I can see so many things that need to be done in the administration of departments. These departments run single-handedly. There's nobody who has any conception of how these departments are run, because nobody has the time to do it. And that's a crime. If any business was run the way the city of Fulton is run, they'd be out of business in a year's time. Now, Phil also alluded, I've forgotten that point. Well, when I come to it, I'll bring it up again. Alice?
won't go over what Phil has said because some of it I agree with, some I don't. But what I would like to ask the question is, what are the duties of the alderman and the mayor? When you're running for office, is there any specific thing that you have to look at to know if you're qualified? Like if I wanted to run for alderman, how would I know what my duties are going to be? Is there anything I can look up?
Charter, city charter.
The city charter?
Yes.
You have to go down to the city hall and get it?
Yeah, unless you want to pay $250 for one.
Oh, no. And are the aldermen also permitted to go into the departments, or is that just the mayor's job?
Yeah, but they have the same problem. Where are they going to find the time?
Time seems to be the essence of everything, but it's a job that you take. You have to commit yourself for a couple of years.
Well, let me ask you this, Alice. If you were working full-time, and you've been there, and you come up, found that, like one alderman did, that he was being paid approximately 11 cents an hour for his time, how would you feel about that?
Well, that's a tricky question because I've always hated it. When I was in bowling and the secretaries started to say they had to be paid, when they brought it down to 10 cents an hour, I got very upset because if you got the job, you did it because you liked it. You wanted to take the job because you liked it.
Okay. Now let me ask you another question that I'm sure you're going to hate I ask. Why don't you run for alderman?
I'm too old.
Not as old as I am, honey.
Yes, I am. I'm older than you are, George.
No, you're not, Alice.
Well, we won't get into age, but I'm older than you are.
All right. But you certainly are able. I know that.
Now,
But, you know, that's exactly the problem. There are a lot of people like yourself that feel the same way, that, okay, you asked for it, so don't complain because you're not getting paid enough or you don't have time. But I don't see any of those people coming forth to run.
Well, I've never done a job for the money. Every time I've done work in my life, it's been volunteer because as a housewife raising a family, I worked at home and I volunteered my services, whether it was on a registration board, bowling, teaching bowling, everything I did was voluntary. So when I'd come up across these people who always wanted to work for the money, I figured you just can't get money when it's volunteer work. You're supposed to volunteer.
Well, they're not working for the money, that's for sure. But
no, I know they're not. And if
my point, let me finish the point, is that this alderman figures he's making 11 cents an hour, but he still doesn't have time to check on these departments to see that they're run efficiently. That's the problem. Now, I'm sure you don't want him to double his time that he's spending already, which is far excessive considering everything, his work, his home, his family, and everything else. In order to accomplish that, it simply isn't possible. That's why you have 3 aldermen that aren't running.
Well, it's too bad you can't have aldermen that want to stay. Like we had Jim McNamara that stayed for so long, Harold Guilfoyle that stayed for so long. What's the difference today that they don't want to stay?
You got to ask yourself what was accomplished, I think.
Well, as an administrator is, I've always been for a manager because a manager is someone that's going to manage. Now, you people use managing and administrator. When somebody's talking about it, they'll say, we need a manager. But then you say an administrator, and they're two different things. An administrator administers, and a manager manages. And if we need business, we need a manager. If we want the city to run, we need a manager.
No, there really isn't much difference.
Well,
you call it an administrator because that's the title for a person in government who does administer and, in effect, manages. But you can't say he manages because he's taking his orders from the mayor and the common council. He's like a foreman in a factory.
Well, in my opinion, if you get a good administrator, suppose
Yes.
you'd be running again and you'd get a good administrator.
Yes.
And he's your man and you like him and he's doing a swell job for the city and we'd all like him. Even the people in the city of Fulton would like him. But because you're a Republican and if a Democrat would come in, he'd want his own. And then we'd lose a good man.
Well, that's the reason.
What would prevent that?
That's the reason why my suggestion was that he be subject to the mayor and the common council. That way, no one person can control him, and he has a better chance of staying on. Also, to answer one of Phil's questions on that point, he isn't necessarily going to revolve every 2 years. If he's doing a good job and the members of the council feel he is, he's going to stay on because they're going to need him because he is doing the job that he is supposed to be doing.
Well, that's good. That's my point. They can keep them. If you get a good man and keep them, that's fine. The idea is, well, everybody, I wish half of them were staying because they're just beginning to get their feet wet, but
No, that's true. That's what's wrong with a 2-year term. Vern?
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't sure which way you were going here.
I'm not always sure myself.
First of all, I'm speaking as an individual. I'm also a member, obviously, of the former Mayor's Council, but I'm just basically speaking as an individual and probably will bring up some of the points that we want to, as a collective group, say tonight. First of all, we really applaud the mayor and the council for entertaining this position as city administrator / personnel director. I don't think it's been any secret that I personally have not, from the proposal that was first put out, have not been wild about many of the provisions. And in meeting with the former mayors, and I know that Percy Patrick is here, and Mario Allerton is here, and I don't know if Ron and John here. They're back. Okay. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend the last meeting, but I think from a consensus and working through some auspices of the Chamber of Commerce, that we have sent you a revised proposal for your consideration, which we think sort of cleans up and sort of brings into focus what at least the 5 former mayors would like to see, along with the business community, so that you have that before you and hopefully would consider this. There are some provisions in there that we did not like for various reasons that we think that could benefit the city of Fulton in a more favorable way. So with that, I would just hope that you would consider the revised proposal that you all have, and we really applaud you for considering this, and I know that you're probably going to get a lot of heat on some of the issues, but I think that if you look at it from an overall basis, and I know, Alice, that you haven't been there, and it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work for the mayor, it's a lot of work for the alderman, and I don't care if it's 11 cents an hour or 3 cents an hour or 50 cents an hour, it's just a lot of work. I think testimony of that is that you've got 4 people that are sitting up there at this point. They're not running for re-election for various reasons. It is a lot of work. This is a big job. It's a $10 million, $12 million corporation, whatever. It takes a lot of time. So I would just hope that you would take under consideration the revised proposal. Don't have to go over item by item. You all have it. And I'm sure that some of the other members of the committee will speak at their proper time. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to add, too, in a minute, Ann, that the governing a city has become an incredibly complex operation. Daily, I'm snowed under by reports, by mandates, by directives, by new laws that are being passed, both federal and state. Mandates from the EPA, the DEC, the DOT, God knows how many other alphabetized departments. We have to be aware of the New Americans for Disability Act. We have to be sure that we're in conformance with that. We have to be sure we're in conformance with the Hazardous Materials Acts, with OSHA, safety for workers, with the regulations under the labor laws, which almost change daily, it seems. And there's just no end to it. Frankly, I, in a turn, will applaud former mayors who are not lawyers, who are able to function at all. Because I see so much material that comes through that is concerning the law. That's about all you hear of anymore today anyway. And I say that any mayor who takes the job who is not a lawyer has got his hands full. And he needs all the help he can get. Ann?
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on what Werner said. As Werner said, the Board of the Chamber of Commerce endorsed the position of the city administrator for exactly the reasons that you were talking about. This is a $12 million business, and it's the only $12 million business that I know of where we don't have a single person who's responsible for running the business on a day-to-day basis. Your role is to create the policy for the city. We need to have a city administrator who's responsible for implementing that policy. What I'd like to do, though, is just take a minute to go through the recommendations that we made that are different from what was originally proposed. And the reason I'd like to go through that is that I think that they're really important differences, and would like to be very clear about that. First of all, we think it's very important that this position be called a city administrator and not a city administrator and personnel director. The reason for that is that the personnel director work that was itemized is very important work to do, but it's so time-consuming that it could easily absorb half to three-quarters of the time of this new city administrator. And if that happens, we're no better off than we are right now. So it's really important that this position be clearly, strictly a city administrator. Secondly, it's important that the city administrator report directly to the mayor and not to the mayor and the common council. There are both legal reasons for that and practical reasons for it. The legal reasons are that modern employment law raises some serious issues when you have somebody who's reporting to 7 bosses. And I don't think that's a situation that the city wants to get into. And as a practical matter, you know what it's like if you have to report to 7 people. I mean, you guys actually report to 1,000 people, but you'd be creating an impossible situation if you create a city administrator job where this person has to report to 7 people. They really should report to just 1. Thirdly, this position should serve at the pleasure of the mayor. The role of the mayor should be to hire the person, to fire them, to supervise them, to give them direction. The relationship that this person should have with the Common Council is that they should be regularly responsible for updating the Common Council on the progress of the city. But that relationship with the Common Council should be consultative, informative, collaborative. It shouldn't be a direct reporting relationship. What we'd recommend is that you do it exactly the same way that you do the city attorney. The mayor would pick the city administrator, and the Common Council approves the city administrator's salary. That's exactly the way that it works in the city of Oswego, and it works just fine there. It's the way it works for Onondaga County, and it works just fine there, too. And finally, in this job description, we think it's important that it be very clear that the city administrator is directly responsible for supervising the city department heads. You know, when I look at those of you who've decided not to run for a re-election, I'm really saddened that you've decided not to run, because I think that you guys have had some terrific ideas about how to move our city forward. It's a very frustrating job, and you think about why should it be so frustrating? You've come up with great policies, you've passed laws, we've got great city workers, they're talented, they're experienced, they're committed, so what's happening? What you need to have is a city administrator who's responsible for implementing the policies that you pass, someone where the buck will stop here, and that person will be responsible for coordinating and problem solving and day-to-day responsibilities. Finally, I'd like to add, I think it was Alice brought up the point about is the person going to turn over every 2 years, or every time the mayor changes, or you're going to get a new one? You could do that, but I was talking to some folks at Onondaga County today, and what they've told me is that they have the equivalent of an administrator, and someone who is right now reports to Nicholas Pirro, who's the county executive in Onondaga County. So he's the chief elected officer. He's really analogous to our mayor. This same person has been in Onondaga County for years and years and years, or decades, and reported to John Mulroy before Nick Pirro. So I think there's no reason to believe that this position is something that we're not going to be able to build some experience in if we create the job right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Ann on the fact that the administrators tend to stay on for a long time. Phil raised the question that you're not going to find anybody who is going to take a job that may only last 2 years. Well, I'll guarantee that as soon as you put an ad in the professional journals and the papers of an open position, that you're going to be deluged with applications. There are an awful lot of talented men out there and women who have lost their jobs in exactly that type of position, that are just praying for an opportunity to go to work. So I'm not concerned about that. Same way with city engineer. When we put out the ads for that, I got a lot of applications of qualified men, so I'm not really that concerned about that problem. Anybody else? John?
George, couldn't you have a part-time mayor and extend the term to 4 years? I mean, wouldn't that would answer the 2-year
Oh, I
problem?
think it's a great idea. It's never been, they've never
I
been
mean,
able
why
to.
couldn't you include that in it?
It's never been able to pass it, though. The voters have always turned it down.
Yeah, with the administrator now, though, you might be able to.
I think 2 years is much too short. As Phil Blair pointed out, you spend the first year getting used to the job, 6 months doing some work, and 6 months running for re-election if you decide to run. So you really don't have much quality time.
One other point. If you recruit, don't you think you should take from Fulton first?
Oh, yes. I think
before you recruit somewhere else?
I think that's true in any job.
Okay. Thank
yes, thank you. Yes.
Names, please.
Sure. Yeah, will the speakers please give their name? Muriel? I doubt it. That's really necessary, Muriel, but I think.
I brought everything with me.
Oh, my God.
I started all of this several years ago. I was a rarity. I was able to devote 50 and 60 hours a week to this, including a free, unpaid consultant who supported me in everything I did, my husband. I realized that very few people would be able to continue, as I was able to do, devoting full time. I thank heaven for department heads, because we had weekly meetings and we worked together, and they helped in so many ways to solve the problems of the city with me. I'm a great consulter. I'll consult with anybody that will help to solve a problem. It was at that time that I mentioned to Fred Sumner, my city attorney, that I worried about the future, about young people being able to be mayor, because they had careers and families and couldn't possibly devote that kind of time to the job. It was he who suggested gathering together the former mayors, which we did. As you know, they spent a great deal of time and put together a wonderful report. It's on file. I think Verna has a copy, and so does Percy and Ron Woodward and John Johnson. They worked very hard. We tried very hard to create a 4-year term, and the voters voted no. That was rather discouraging, followed by the fact that the budget was in difficulty that year, and we were in no position to add an assistant to the mayor when we were laying a good many very valuable people off. So it died until it was resurrected, and I'm sorry that I nailed you for this local law, and I told him that I'd maybe crochet him a hat or something in retribution. But and I won't crochet a hat for you, George.
How quickly they forget.
We feel very strongly that in order for any younger person who has a family and a job to fulfill this increasingly onerous responsibility, that he or she needs help. And we have proposed and agreed with the Chamber of Commerce that it should be an assistant to the mayor. It works very successfully in Oswego, and it's wonderful to consider that you might want to keep a valuable person on, but there are loyalties, and the loyalties might get in the way of this mayor fulfilling his or her complete responsibility. And if you'll give me a minute, I think you will be a little chastened by the responsibility that a mayor does have. I don't know how recently you've read this, but I will tell you, the mayor is responsible for carrying out all of the laws of the state and ordinances and bylaws passed by the Common Council and the boards of the city are faithfully executed within the city, he shall sign on behalf of the city all contracts made by it and cause the seal of the city to be affixed thereto. He shall, when present, be the presiding officer of the Common Council. He shall have power and authority to call out and command the police and firemen of the city whenever, in his discretion, he shall deem it necessary, and such command shall be in all respects obeyed. Whenever necessary for the prevention or suppression of public disturbances, mobs, or riots, it shall be his duty to take such action as is authorized by Chapters 3 and 4 of the Criminal Procedure Law, etc. It shall be his duty to exercise a constant supervision and control over the conduct of all city officers, and he shall have power and authority to examine at all times the books, vouchers, and papers of any board, officer, or employee of said city, and to take and hear testimony and proof in pursuance of Chapter 842 to 869 of the Code of Civil Procedure. And it goes on to say that the mayor must notify where he or she keeps the office. It shall be the duty of the mayor to communicate to the Common Council as soon after his election is practicable and as often thereafter as he may deem expedient a general statement of the affairs of the city in relation to its finances, government, and improvement, with such recommendations as he may deem proper. I was always overwhelmed by the importance of my role and saw to it that I followed to the letter whatever responsibility I had. And thank heaven for the department heads, because the city chamberlain and the city clerk were in my office constantly giving me guidance, which I very much needed. And I was never thanked you adequately enough for all the help that was given to me when I was here. But I thought you ought to know that whatever younger person assumes this office is going to need assistance. And if we're going to fulfill the obligation to this city and put it on the map as a great little place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sam?
Sam Galizia. Just want to say a few words here. I pretty much agree with what Muriel said and the other people that stood up here. But one thing I wanted to add, when this was put on referendum for a 4-year term, it was defeated. But the feeling at that time was most people felt that it was too long to put anybody in office. But my feelings are that if we had a 3-year term, I think people in this community would accept that. And you really need 3 years. 2 years is too short. Because the first year is really a learning experience for most people. They're just overwhelmed with the job. And I think this way they'd have 2 years to really devote to the job. And that extra year is not that much longer if people in the community feel that somebody, that they want to get out of office. But 3 years, I think, is a must. And I think if that was put on the referendum this fall, I really feel strongly that it would pass. And I think we really, a person in office needs that much time just to really do a job. And that's all I want to add to it. And I think we should seriously consider that for this fall on the ballot, a 3-year term. And then there's a potential, too, I don't know if it would work out, that possibly the terms could be staggered. Because, I mean, there's a potential that you could suddenly lose your whole council in 1 year, and then you've got all new people. Maybe there's a possibility we could stagger the terms so that they don't all come up at one time. I think that would be a good idea. And that way you would always have experience on the council. So that's something to consider also. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, so those are good ideas. Anyone else? Ron?
You, Matt. So I just want to state that I feel it's important, and the council knows it's important, that we do have the administrator. A 4-year or a full-term mayor would be just as bad as what we have now as far as finding candidates without an administrator. It's not the way to go. As you can see, this year, the only people we have running are independent businessmen, because they're the only ones that could afford any of the time to run for the office. Or with the administrator, as the mayor has suggested, other people would have a chance to run. The only other point is that I feel it's very important that the person is appointed solely by the mayor, because the mayor has to live and die by the person that they choose to do this job. If this person does not do the job, then the mayor loses the next time he runs or she runs. But to have it become a civil service type job or a continuous job where it's permanent is not good, because it's a person that's got to be completely trustworthy with the mayor. The mayor is going to let this person do things when the mayor's not there that the mayor is still responsible for. And I think there has to be a buildup of trust there between the two people. That it should not be an appointment of the council. It definitely should be an appointment of the mayor.
Thank you, Ron. Anybody else? Anyone from the council that wants to speak?
I'd like to say a couple things.
John?
First of all, there's been some talk about why people are not running for public office. And the 11 cents an hour, a statement which I made, I would like to clarify that a little bit. I said that as a matter of fact, not as a matter of that I wanted more money. I didn't come in to be an alderman for the money. I've been a volunteer in the city for a long time, and I was looking at this as something to do positive for the city, not to make money. One of the reasons that I'm not running, I don't know if it's public knowledge, that I have a new position. And in my new position, I'm spending more time at my job than I was in my former position when I was elected. I have found that in doing this, many times I've come to council meetings not as prepared as I would like to be. And if you can't be on top of things, and there's a lot of things to do as an alderman, that you should step aside and let someone else get involved who could maybe do a better job. So those are my reasons for running. You kind of run out of time if you take a lot of time at your job and be alderman. I don't have an 8-to-5 job. I think Phil said that a lot of people have been here for 20 years. Well, those people maybe had 8-to-5 jobs where they could spend some time with their family and then come to a council meeting. I don't have that luxury. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I waited to the last minute not to run because I really wanted to. I like the job, and yes, it is frustrating, but it's also very satisfying. I just wanted to clarify that. A couple things I've noticed since being alderman, why we need a city administrator. We as councilmen spend a lot of time researching things. Coming in, spending a lot of nights here, researching problems of the city, trying to come up with a direction to go. My feeling is that as a councilman, if you have a city administrator, you go to a meeting and the administrator says, here's our problem. Now here's 1, 2, 3 alternatives to solve this problem. This is the one I recommend that the council go with. Now, the council should study that and then come back and make a decision. And I think that way you can make a more intelligent decision. A lot of times we're reinventing the wheel and starting right from scratch with problems in the city. And I think you can see that sometimes you stumble a little bit if you haven't had time to research something properly. And you may do something and then redo it. I think with an administrator, you'd solve some of that and probably make a lot better decisions. The salary of the administrator was discussed. I think a good administrator would more than pay for his salary. There are things that I see happening in the city that if I had time to devote would institute. Cost savings, we talked about that. There's a lot of things you can ask people for how to save money. an administrator could be responsible for something like that. I'm sure he would save more than his $40,000 or $50,000 that we want to pay this person. One of the points that I've read both proposals, and I know the Chamber former mayor's proposal wanted the administrator to serve a 2-year term at the pleasure of the mayor. One thing I'm trying to decide in my own mind is if this is good or not. I think we need some consistency, and maybe the 3-year term that Sam was talking about is a good idea for consistency. But from one administration to the other, I know we all started and many of us were new, and we had an awful lot to learn. If we had an administrator in here from a previous administration to provide that consistency, we may not have stumbled as much as we did. So, but I also see the point that you want somebody who's loyal to you. And in my mind, I'm still trying to work through that. I think a lot of times I've called department heads, and they are good people. But many times, 2 other aldermen have called before me, and the department head is trying to set a priority. And maybe he's already moved his equipment to some other ward, and I think my project is more important. Well, he's already got his equipment someplace else, so, and he may feel that my project is more important, but he would have to, I'm third in line because I called third. So I think from a setting of a priority standpoint, that a city administrator, the alderman could call the city administrator with their problems, and this person could set the priorities for the department heads on a daily basis. And we'd get more efficient work done, and in the proper order. That's all I have.
Thank you, John. John touched on one subject of not running. Also applies to me. It's very frustrating to be accustomed to doing a good job, as I hope I've done in my business for years, take this job and not be able to do what you think should be done. And, you know, that can make for a very frustrating day after day after day. Spencer, you wanted to make a few comments? Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody else? No? Oh, Ross, okay.
I always have something to say. In reference to the city administrator, I think it's badly needed, very badly needed. If nothing else, we need someone to communicate with, someone that we could see face to face every day within the working day. Right now, we don't have that. We need someone to communicate with because of the 15 to 50 calls that we get a week with problems in the city. Sometimes we have no one to bring them to if the mayor isn't available. You also have many priority items. And a priority item to me is what my people would like me to do for them. The thing is, I can bring a priority item to a department head, but like John said, if someone else comes in talking faster and stronger, my priority item gets put somewhere else. So you need someone that could look at everything and weigh it and not take sides because of who is approaching him or her. Having a city administrator, we're asking the city to change its way of thinking too, and that's something that is very difficult for people to do. People resist change because they don't know what's going to happen. But change isn't always bad. It's difficult to change your ways, especially in the city of Fulton where things have been done for the same way for the same 35 or 40 years. And a prime example of that was a meeting that I held last week and wanted to, in reference to the city administrator, some people got wind of it and all of a sudden they got very, very tense that they were going to lose some of their job duties. Someone was going to put them out of a job. We haven't talked about putting anyone out of a job. We're talking about making things better. And I was told, well, we heard people talking on the street. Well, a lot of people talk on the street. Are you going to go and argue with everyone that talks on the street because we might change things to make it better? We have to get away from that primitive way of thinking. We need to change if the city is going to move forward. The people that are against the city administrator, I bet none of them have sat in on a city budget, on a grievance hearing, contract negotiations, code enforcement meetings, civil service meetings, and have tried to get something through the court system here. They haven't had to deal with that. That's what we have to deal with. That's why we need someone that we can communicate with, that can prioritize our items, and we're not going to get pushed aside because something else comes along that sounds better this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Anyone else?
George?
Jim?
I've had several people give their opinion on whether we should have an administrator or a full-time mayor. And as I told some of the reporters, on the surface of it, the full-time mayor sounded like a good idea. And on the other hand, and Alice kind of alluded to this, we don't have qualifications for mayor or alderman. We have job duties once they get in, but there's nothing to say that, well, before you become mayor, you have to have, these qualifications, a degree and so much experience in government like that. That's where the advantage would be in having an administrator, because you could pick and choose just who you want based on their experience. Also, what that would do is to free up the mayor and give him or her a chance to possibly go to conferences and meetings. I know you've been to some, and I'd wish you could have gone to more. Ross and I went to some, and they're very informative, and then the mayor could come back and discuss this with the administrator and implement some of these ideas. But with a part-time mayor and part-time alderman, it's hard to do that. And, the recommendation from the chamber and the former mayors, starting with John Johnson, and Elon Rowley isn't with us anymore, but continuing through the end of George's term, is 34 years of experience, and I think we should rely heavily on their recommendations because they've been there. They know just what the job is like.
Yes, Jim, those are some very good ideas, and you touched on a point that is important. You can prescribe the qualifications for an administrator, but you can't really do that for a mayor and a common councilor. With these, our duties may be outlined in the charter. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to get done. And a mayor should be able to do policy planning. Something I wanted to do, never had a chance to get to, is planning. And that's one of the things that's sadly lacking in this city. Where we're going 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road. Same is true of the council. We don't have the time to do that. You work on a day-to-day basis when you should be doing more of that policy work and the planning, attending the seminars that Jim mentioned. Those are very important, and I always feel badly that I can't attend more because you learn a great deal from them. You get the input from all over the country, from organizations like New York Conference of Mayors who have wide and extensive experience in municipal affairs in the state of New York, and we're a member of that organization, and their input is valuable, but you don't have time. You don't even have time to talk to them sometimes when you should for a consultation. While the administrator does exactly that. He administers the city's business while the mayor and common council dictate the policy. Anyone else from the council? Spencer, you wanted to say something?
Just briefly, with respect to the legislation, to address some concerns. As far as the administrator, I've advised the council, there may not be a problem, I don't believe, appointment of the mayor, serve at the pleasure of the mayor. But much like the position of city attorney, you have more than one boss. And I don't believe that might be a problem as much as some people may think. The reason why that was thought of was because simply the legislation needs to pass if it's in order to be implemented. So that was one of the concerns of the mayor had with respect to this legislation. If you're going to be able to get it passed, you may have to give some power to the common council. Whether the common council is willing to do so and allow the administrator to serve at the pleasure of the mayor and serve for the mayor, then certainly that's within their rights to do. Just to step out of my role as city attorney, I think you can't run a city on a part-time basis, and a 4-year term is an excellent idea. You've got, like Mr. Drone said, a $12 million annual budget, and you can't run a corporation or a municipality on a part-time basis, and certainly a full-time administrator. And I believe a majority of the problems that I've seen as city attorney involve personnel. We have an incredible amount of legal and policy problems with personnel, and I think that this person should, but obviously with the consent of the mayor and the common council, should address those personnel problems. We spend hours trying to figure out precisely what to do when it comes to a city employee, and generally they're good employees that we want to keep, but we have problems, and there are civil service problems, and there's an incredible amount of rules and regulations that we have to abide by. This person could weed through those problems and address the council and the mayor as to precisely what the options are that they have, instead of wasting a lot of time trying to figure out what the rules are. So I think it's important that it's being addressed, and I think it's a good debate, and I hope that the council and the mayor are able to get something through. But certainly this administrator would be an excellent position for someone to really weed through a lot of the problems, and I'm convinced that it would pay for itself quickly. And $30,000 or $40,000 on a $12 million budget, especially when somebody's going to be trimming that budget, he'll be able to pay for, he or she will be able to pay for themselves.
Thank you, Spencer. Anyone else? Alex? Alice? 1 more minute.
I'd like to ask 2 questions. First, if we do get this administrator, how will that be done? Will we have to put a referendum, or is it going to be you appointing him, or how is this going to be done?
No, you don't need a referendum to secure an administrator. Only if those...
The council have to vote on it, and that'll
be it? The
be
council has to vote on it, and then you would advertise for that position, yes.
And question number 2, in regards to those 3-year terms for aldermen, would that have to be changed on a referendum, or would
Yes.
that would be?
Yeah. Any change in the tenure of any elected official would have to be changed by referendum.
If they have to do that, and it sounds like a good idea because it's true they don't have much time, maybe it would be a very good idea to have it like we used to do. The highest amount of vote would be the longest term, like the 3 years, like they said, the stagger system, 3 years and then stagger, so you'd always have experienced people on the board. And I think it would encourage people to go out and vote. They'd want their guy from their ward to get the most votes so that he'd have the longest term. And I think you need something to make people vote because they don't get out and vote too often. But it would be helpful in making people say, if we get out and all vote, our guy's going to get the third, the longest term.
Yeah, it has some merit. You could have 2 expiring every year.
Yeah.
And then for a 3-year term, that would work out mathematically well.
And do it by the amount of votes. Like each ward has so many, if the percentage of the votes come out is the closest to what their voting registry is, that would be the highest vote, the vote getter. The most popular vote would be the longest term. You know what I mean?
You mean the first time you run it by?
Yeah. That's how you've got to start it. You've got to start this staggering system somehow, because everybody gets elected at the same time.
That's true. Well, yeah, that's a good point.
I get a lot of my experience from voting.
Ask the Brain Trust to run that one through. Thank you, Alice. Larry, you wanted to say something?
I'm Larry Hoyt, and I just got 2 quick comments. Everybody in the room seems to be in agreement that we need an administrator. Second comment, let's do it.
Everybody except Phil. Anybody else? Tommy? Why aren't you out playing golf?
Just finished, Mayor.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just some observations and suggestions. I would first like to thank the aldermen who have served and who are leaving. I, too, sat in that seat and understand the difficulties of the job. I would like to make a suggestion that the person, whether it be male or female, who we determine to serve this position, is not perceived as the second coming. Too many times the process gets clouded with, we're going to have somebody come along, and we've all had the knocks on the door, and what each of you will do for us during your 2-year tenure. We understand that process. I think what the public doesn't understand is how hard you work or try to work to accomplish that. But as I said here tonight, and I've heard each of you say in one way or another, that it can't be done. It can't be done perhaps for a number of reasons, but I'm going to keep it focused because I think that's what happens in the political spectrum. We lose focus, we lose purpose. And when issues come up, they become politicized. Cats draw bigger crowds than running our city. And we have to ask ourselves why that is so. Tonight, as we've progressed in the purpose of this meeting, which is to find a mayor's assistant or a city administrator, we now start to leak out into terms for aldermen, this and that, and we lose focus. I do wish this council and the parties involved, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, whomever, realize that they also have a responsibility for our successes and for our failures. If we have failed in the last 20 years, has it been because the community hasn't been supportive or the community hasn't been led? Leadership, in my way of thinking, is the secret to success, whether it be of one party or the other. Strong leadership provides answers. Strong leadership takes us from the known to the unknown. And I think that's what some of the people have talked about. We've all had our past glories. We've all had our past successes and our past failures. But we don't survive on that. We don't need to open up South First Street. We need to open up our minds. We need to be able to express ideas without fear of being incriminated or laughed at or looked down upon. We need to express exactly what it is we'd like to see happen. And if it doesn't happen, to get on with it. We need to cooperate. We need to relocate downtown. Doesn't have to be there. We can relocate it. We need that type of thinking, whether it be radical or progressive or stupid. We need to discuss it. So many times we spend time with mundane, non-functioning discussions and arguments. I plead for the parties involved in the Chamber of Commerce, who has taken an active role in our city, that their responsibility is to educate and find qualified people for these offices. Not because he or she is popular, not because he or she is financially independent, not because they know everybody and they don't have many enemies. Why do we look upon the people who run our city? What is their purpose and what is their reason for taking this office? I understand the difficulties of it. And I would hope this council, in deliberating these issues, will ask themselves, is it leadership we need? Is it city administrators we need? Is it imagination we need? Or is it willingness to take chances? I hope it's going to be all of those. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
George. Okay.
Ross.
Another good example of why we need a city administrator is that you need someone that can go around to the departments and circulate and talk to the department heads. Most all the people that work for the city that I've talked to enjoy sharing what they do. They want us to know what they do, and they're very good at what they do. On the other hand, you also find things that are going on in the city that shouldn't be going on. For example, what I found last year, we had an employee bringing their child to work for years on city time, getting paid for it, and when I asked the department head why this person was allowed to bring their child to work, he said no one ever thought there was a problem with it, but no one ever knew about it. That puts us in a lot of liability if that child is hurt. That's wrong. And he should have taken it upon himself. He should have known better not to allow that. It's also not fair to other people in the city that have children that would like to, bring them to work and not pay for child care. That's wrong. And when I asked the person what they were doing in the supervisor's office when they had a job to do, the response was, I'm a supervisor and I don't have to be out to see what's going on. I have people working for me. Again, that's why you need a city administrator to find out what's going on out there. And I'm sure there aren't very many cases like that, but just one case like that gives the city a bad name. And we could be liable for a lot of money.
Thank you, Ross. Anyone else? Okay, there being no further discussion, public hearing is closed. The matter will be referred to the Forward Planning Committee for a final drafting to present to the council. And the interested parties will also be contacted for their input. Thank you very much.
George?
Yes.
I was going to make a recommendation, possibly the council and maybe the former mayor's committee and maybe the mayor candidates might get together for a workshop sometime and go through each item and
it's fine.
We can get a final draft and then present it in a future meeting.
Well, yeah, but I think Forward Planning Committee should set it up.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, that's a good idea. We have one item on discussion, emergency tear down. Who knows about that? Ross, is that your baby?
I think this is the house that was on the agenda the last time I wasn't here and nobody voted on it, I believe. Neil, do you know what this is? No? Is this the house on Van Buren Street?
Is that still privately owned?
This is, I believe, a piece of property that we can take down. It's not fit for habitation and also behind on taxes. There's no one living there.
We're going to have to go through all the steps.
Is Steve Lund here?
Particularly in view of that case decided by Judge Hurlbut.
Steve, could you give us information on this?
From what I can gather reading the statutes, there's a possibility that you could tear down a house like this under the emergency measure, but I've talked to Spencer and George and the city attorney, and they've all advised me to not pursue it in that direction.
Yeah, the Judge Hurlbut has just ruled against the city of Oswego, who went through a procedure to tear down a place exactly like that, and because there was no hearing held where a stenographer was present, testimony taken under oath, the owner given an opportunity to attend and testify. He ruled the city was wrong, and now the city's going to pay damages to that owner. So I think it's very important that we go through all the steps before demolishing anything.
Okay, I thought I was told that this particular house, we had gone through the steps. Steve?
We've issued the first letter, which is the bill of particulars on what exactly is wrong with the house. I think there's 15 days or 30 days that they have to respond to that after they've received the certified letter. And at that point, we can serve them with notice for the hearing.
Did you send a letter out certified?
Yes.
And when was it sent?
I think it was last week that we sent it. We had some trouble finding one of the parties. They were down in Florida. But everybody has been legally served now.
Okay, so then we changed our point of view from 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, because 2 weeks ago I was told that it could be taken down. Now I'm being told it can't be taken down.
Ross, 2 weeks ago, he was under a misapprehension. It was not his fault.
I'm not blaming. I just want to know what the chain of events were.
He did believe that under the emergency procedure he could go ahead. Our advice was not to do that, not to take a chance, to go through all the procedures prescribed by our statute anyway, rather than risk being sued by the owner because we didn't go through all the steps.
We can just schedule a hearing. If the person does not show up for the hearing, we can proceed. If they come to the hearing, we'll have the hearing and then make a determination and demolish the residence.
Okay, how many hearings are we planning on having?
One.
Well, I mean there are about 6 or 7 houses in the ward that need to be taken down.
We have a hearing
Are we doing
plan.
one a year? That means that we have to look at the rest of them for 7 more years. Are we going to do one a month? How are we going to do it?
Just as fast as they can be done.
Mm-hmm. There was a program on TV this week, I don't know if anybody caught it, on the very same thing that I've been trying to do, clean up the city of Fulton and especially my ward. And it's working, and it's a community in Texas. Did anyone see that?
Ross, unfortunately, Texas law doesn't work in New York.
Okay, but let me
They
just...
do a lot of strange things in Texas that we don't do.
One of the reasons why it's working is because the city court is involved with the takedowns and the code enforcement. The city court takes a walk to the places and looks to see what they look like, so they have a frame of reference as to what the aldermen are dealing with. First offense, the judge gives them a $250 fine and 9 days in jail. The second offense, he gives them a $10,000 fine against their property and brings a bulldozer in and takes it down.
Well, as I said before, in Texas, they do things a lot differently. If you tried that today, you'd not only get sued, you'd probably wind up in jail yourself. Thank God that we didn't go ahead with our original plan. We might be now looking at 6 or 7 different lawsuits that we'd be liable for. We were very fortunate that we did delay until that decision came out by Judge Herbert.
Yeah, but that was different. That was because of the house was damaged by fire.
It doesn't make a bit of difference.
These are back taxes, I think.
No.
This particular house is...
No.
That's what I was told, that this one was on back taxes.
Well, you can't tear your house down because it's bad on back taxes unless the city takes ownership.
Well, back taxes and because of the condition of the house.
Well, the condition of the house in Oswego was exactly what was in point. And because a hearing was not taken or held according to their own ordinance in the proper manner, that's why the judge ruled against it. And of course, it's too late now because the house is torn down.
They won in the end run. The city won, but the way the city of Oswego proceeded in that case was clearly a violation of that particular person's due process rights, and particularly to a hearing. The city of Oswego did not afford the defendant, or landlord, a hearing. They did not afford him the opportunity to testify, cross-examine any witnesses, and just the city merely moved in and destroyed the house. Fortunately for the city, there were some other legal reasons why they were not actually liable. But before we go in and spend a lot of legal fees and et cetera, trying to clean up a mess created, my advice has been it can't delay things too much to afford the person a hearing to come in and testify and tell us that they can't do anything or that they're going to do. And I think not only is it the proper legal procedure to do, I think it's the humanitarian approach to a problem, and I think these people should be afforded an opportunity to be heard. And Stephen sent out a certified letter. We had some difficulty tracking these people down because one person lives in Florida. These are problems that we run into. They've all been served. Everybody's served. We've going to schedule a hearing once the time frame is up. If they don't show, we're getting the bulldozers. I don't want to be an obstructionist, and I feel as though it seems as though I'm an obstructionist, but in the sense of doing it right once, that's the way I got to do things. So
I'm not asking for anyone to do anything illegal, but the only life that's there in these homes are rats and mice and garbage.
Mike.
Does our ordinance procedure require a hearing?
Yes. Well, it wouldn't matter whether it did or not.
Well, I mean, if it doesn't, then I think we need to change the ordinance to
Well,
do this.
It does, but constitutionally you have to anyway. But you know, I'll get to you in a minute. I hate to keep repeating this, But nothing was done about these things for years until our administration. We got a law passed, we started the machinery, and again, it's a good thing we didn't do anything about it because we might now be liable for a lot of lawsuits. But at least we're doing something. And I appreciate Ross's predicament. He's promised he's going to get these things done. They haven't been done. People are wanting to know why not. But we are doing the best we can, and we will do it, and those houses will come down. Yes?
George, I didn't promise. I learned not to make promises in this job. But I did say I would pursue it, and I'm not letting up.
Yes?
I remember a month ago, the letters were supposed to be sent out for at least recently, right after the meeting. And how come it's taking them so long to get them out?
Well, apparently you haven't been listening because it's been said twice that they had difficulty finding the owner who moved to Florida. Does that clear up the confusion?
Yes.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone have anything they want to bring before the council? Anyone from the council? Motion to adjourn to executive session.
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.